Hi everyone, this is Ronnie from The Bold Chemist, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to do the tubular bind off. The tubular bind off is a sewn bind off. It's not done with knitting needle but rather a darning needle or tapestry needle, and it's similar to grafting or the Kitchener stitch, but in my opinion a little bit easier. It's a stretchy bind off and it mimics the look of knit and purl stitches in a, for example, in this 1x1 ribbed cuff. This is a twisted knit and purl 1x1 rib, but it doesn't really matter if it's normal knit stitches or twisted. It's gonna look very nice all the same. I have completed the first half of my first cuff here, so you can see what it looks like when it's completed. It mimics the look of the knit stitches as if it would just wrap around and fold back and continue on the other side. And it is a stretchy, very nice looking and clean looking bind off. So this cuff will not be tight at all. You can use this bind off on jumper sleeves, jumper bottoms, even on hats or the cuffs of socks. To do this bind off, all you're gonna have to do is trim your yarn end to at least 4 or 5 times the length of the circumference of your cuff. In this case, I left about a yard worth of yarn. It's quite long, so at the beginning it's gonna take a bit longer to pull it through, but as we carry on, it's gonna get shorter. Because the one thing that you don't want is running out of yarn in the middle of it. Apart from the darning needle with your long yarn tail, all you're gonna need is a lockable stitch marker or a V safety pin. The reason you need this is because we are going to secure the first 2 stitches with this, and the reason for that is we're gonna need those stitches to remain sort of semi-live for us to be able to complete the last 2 stitches. We will get there and I will explain to you exactly how it's done. What the tubular bind off is trying to do is mimic a folded brim. The neck of this sweater is a double fabric, so I knitted a double length ribbing and then folded it in half, and then those live ends were knit together with the original cast on edge, and then I carried on knitting that way. And if you look at it from the top, it's beautifully carries on all the way around, and it's a very nice effect. So that's what I'm trying to mimic here in the cuff as well. And as you can see, it will look similar but without the extra bulk of having a double cuff. And I personally don't like a very thick cuff, and neither does my husband, whose sweater this is going to be. Here we go. We're gonna go ahead and start doing this super simple bind off. Now, I know many people who do a grafting or Kitchener stitch have trouble remembering the sequence. Grafting is a little bit different from the tubular bind off. We are not working on the both of the needles, we are only working on the one. Now, normally we would obviously just separate the knit stitches and the purl stitches and then mimic them like that, but we're not gonna do that. We're gonna do everything at the same time, and I promise you it's actually gonna be so easy to remember and so easy to do. First thing that you do is going to insert your little safety pin or lockable stitch marker into your first 2 stitches and close it. Now I'm gonna try my best to do it properly. There we go. And then this is gonna stay in all the way to the end, so it's still in my other one as well. You'll see why. I'm gonna push this back to the side a little bit so you have a clear view of what's going on here. And here comes my darning needle, and this is where we start. First 2 stitches are secured with the lockable stitch marker or safety pin. Our yarn is threaded into our darning needle, and let's bind off. The first thing that you're gonna have to identify is what kind of stitch is the first stitch on your needle. In my case, it's a knit stitch because it's on top of a knit column. Now, if you have a trouble identifying it, a knit stitch will look like little V's which are inserted into each other, and the purl stitch will look like this little horizontal bump. So in this case, this is a knit stitch. And with the tubular bind off, if you see a knit stitch, you're gonna insert the needle knitwise. If you see a purl stitch, you're gonna insert the needle purlwise. This is all to remember about it. Knit is knit and purl is purl, nothing difficult here. So because this is a knit stitch, our first step is to insert our darning needle knitwise, as if to knit, so from left to right. Pull it through, pull your stitch off the needle and let it drop, and then pull your needle through, pull your yarn through, I mean. And then we're gonna skip the purl stitch. We're not gonna worry about it. We're gonna go to our next knit stitch, which is the second one on our needle, the one that doesn't have the safety pin inserted in it. And we're gonna insert our darning needle into our second knit stitch, this time purlwise. And it's gonna stay on our needle. We're gonna pull it all the way through gently. And we're gonna then make sure that it's all snug and we pulled it properly so there is no loose yarn. So far what we did is the knit stitch was, we gone through the knit stitch knitwise, let it fall, and then we went through the next knit stitch purlwise, and it stayed on. Our next stitch is on top of a purl row. The first stitch on our needle is now a purl stitch. It looks slightly different because our working yarn is right in front of it, but ignore that. So as we did with the knit stitch, we went through it knitwise. Because this is a purl stitch, we're gonna go through it purlwise and let it drop. And this is the only part where the tubular bind off can be considered slightly tricky, is this bit where instead of going through the second stitch on the needle, so you're always gonna skip the very next one, we have to go through this knitwise. But the only trick to it is we're gonna have to do that coming from the back. So we have to go through between the first and second stitch with our needle. And then we have to go back knitwise from here. This is only because we've got that first stitch in the way, and this is the only way to approach our second stitch knitwise from the right direction, is to kind of go in a tricky way around our second stitch. Now, this is where the longer yarn tail comes a little bit, becomes a little bit of a bother, but it's no problem at all. You can sort it out. Sometimes I like to only pull once because of the longer yarn tail, so I definitely have enough leeway on the yarn. I'm just checking if everything is properly snugged up so we don't end up with a really ugly yarn end. So I've got a little bit of a loose yarn end here, which I'm just fixing now. Right. So as you know, next one is going to be a knit stitch because it's sitting on top of a knit column. So we're gonna go through it knitwise and let it drop. Knit stitch, go through it knitwise, drop it off, skip the next purl and go through the next knit purlwise and leave it on. Next one is a purl stitch. We're going through it purlwise and drop it off. And then we're gonna go through the next purl stitch knitwise and leave it on. Now, this was maybe not as properly visible as possible because I've done it in the one step. So in the next one, I'm going to actually show you a very slow-mo version of that knit, going through the second purl stitch knitwise. So once again, it's a knit stitch, go through it knitwise and drop it off, Then skip the purl and the second knit stitch, go through it purlwise and leave it on. Snug it up. Purl stitch, go through it purlwise and drop it off. Skip the knit stitch, go to the next purl stitch, come from the back between those two, and I'm going to actually pull the needle a bit so you have better access and better understanding, and then we are going to go through that second stitch on our needle, which is a purl stitch, knitwise. There. And pull it all the way through and snug it up. One more time really slowly. Knit stitch, it's sitting on top of a knit column. Go through it knitwise and drop it off. Skip the purl and the next knit stitch, go through it purlwise and leave it on. Purl stitch, go through it purlwise and drop it off. Skip the next knit stitch, go through the next purl stitch, come from the back, and then go through it knitwise and leave it on. I am going to do one or two in my own tempo so you can see how quickly it goes when you're just, you know exactly what you're doing and you can just carry on. You can see this lovely, lovely effect of it twisting around already. Knit stitch, knit, leave on, purl, knit, drop off, purl, leave on, purl, purl, drop off, and knit, leave on. So the only difference between this and grafting is that you always have to skip the stitch that's not the right direction for you, because we can only work one kind at the same time. So right now I'm going to just be working the knit ones, and then afterwards I'm going to work the two purl ones. Knit, drop off, knit purlwise, leave on. Purl, drop off, purl, knitwise, leave on. We're gonna do this all the way around, this side and that side, and when we get back, I will show you how to finish it off. I have arrived back to the last two stitches. That's a knit stitch and a purl stitch, and here I have my first two stitches that have been completed but are still kept live by my safety pin, and I'm gonna use these to be able to finish these two. So the first stitch is a knit stitch, so just like before I'm going to insert my needle knitwise, and I'm gonna let this stitch drop off my needle, put my needle through, and then I'm going to use the first stitch on my safety pin because we have to skip this stitch. That would be a purl stitch. So the next knit stitch will be the one on my safety pin, and I'm going to just put my yarn through it purlwise. So that was the next to last. Snug it up, and then the last one will be a purl stitch, so I'm going to put my needle through it purlwise and let it drop off my needle. And now comes a little bit of a tricky part, so I can now let go of the knitting needle. That is now completed. So now comes the tricky part. I still have the first stitch on the safety pin, and we now need to work into this second one. So just like before, I have to go through in between these two stitches from the back, and then I have to go through this second stitch knitwise from the front. And that is now officially all the stitches all tied up and bound off, so I can open this safety pin and pull it out every single last stitch has been worked, and all I have to do at this point is weave in the end in the back of the work. And the way I like to do that is by hiding it in this knit column. So I'm going to go actually under this little ledge on this side. It's almost like go back under, so I'm gonna have this yarn in the back of my work, and then I'm going to just go through this column of knit stitches like a little spiral. It will be completely invisible. I go through about 5 or 6 of them. Here we go. And then I jump over to the next again column and come back upwards. The way I've been taught is to always go back, forth and back, or front, back, front, 3 directions, because then no matter how you wash it, it's never gonna completely unravel. So I'm going to go back into this column and just push my needle through, and in this instance I'm gonna come out a little bit earlier. That's it. Now usually I would just cut that completely off after blocking. I'm gonna probably leave a little bit out and I'll have a look at it later on, but it actually is going to beautifully disappear. And here I have 2 very nice finished sleeve ends with the tubular bind off. They are stretchy, they are very neat and tidy, and my husband will be very happy to start wearing it soon.